that of interest to you? I believe that is what God wants to talk to us about on today. And so I believe that if you're here on this morning, there's not a coincidence that you're here to receive this word. Amen. I think God wants you to see your life in terms of two categories. So let's talk about what that really means. If you study the Bible, you'll discover that it says that God is on an all-out search for two kinds of people. Two kinds of people. And if you read it from cover to cover, you'll find that God is in search mode. Somebody say search mode. Search mode. But he's not like a casual shopper who's just kind of sifting through the racks trying to figure out what's on sale. No, no, no. He is intensely searching. And he is intent on finding and working with two kinds of people. And all of us in this room can fit in one of those two categories. Now, in reality, there's actually four kinds of people in this world, but God really wants us to be two. Have I piqued your curiosity yet on what these two categories are? Yeah. My hope is that in the next half hour, you're going to be able to diagnose the category that you're in right now and the category that you want to be in. So, anybody ready to get at it this morning? Amen. The first category of people that God is searching for is the fully committed. Let me explain this to you. One time in the Old Testament, a well-intentioned king of Israel named Asa, anybody familiar with Asa? Came under attack from the neighbor to the north. Asa was a seasoned king who had been at war several times before. And in those previous battles, Asa's strategy was to do the best he could to array his troops tactically and then pray that God would fight for them. And God always did. As a result, Asa never lost the battle. But one time, Asa was attacked by a vastly superior force from Ethiopia. In customary fashion, he arrayed his troops and then he prayed. Let me read to you the actual account from the Bible, and if you would like to join me, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 14. So that means you're going to go with me to the Old Testament. You're going to skip past Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, 1st and 2nd Kings, and then you'll be over there. All right, y'all there? Y'all found it? Yep. Let's read into your hearing first verses 9 through 10. If you don't have your Bible, either one will be provided for you, or there is also one. The scriptures that I am reading to you this morning are also on the screen. So if you just need a Bible, raise your hand, and ushers will be happy to get you one. And until you have one, the scripture is on the screen. Once, an Ethiopian named Zerah attacked Judah with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots. They advanced to the city of Marshah, so Asa deployed his armies for battle in the valley north of Marshah. Now I'm going to go down and I'm going to read verse 11. Then Asa cried out to the Lord his God, "O Lord, no one but you can help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord our God, for we trust in you alone. alone. It is in your name that we have come against this vast horde. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let mere men prevail against you. That's what Asa prayed. Look at verse 12 to see what happened next. So the Lord defeated the Ethiopians in the presence of Asa and the army of Judah, and the enemy fled. Stop right there. Tell somebody, we serve a mighty God. We serve a mighty God. So as you can see here, that's the background that I wanted to share for you, to let you see what Asa's history had been with God. And as I had shared with you before I read the scripture, what his pattern had been with God as well. But several years later, somebody say several years later. Several years later. King Asa is older. And he's more established. So when this king from the north attacks him, Asa's reluctant this time to go into battle. Because now, he's got more to lose. He's got more to lose now than when he was just a young king starting out. So this time, somebody say this time. This time. In his conservative days, instead of going to battle, he takes money from his treasury and pays the king of Syria to attack his rival from his eastern flank. That way, Asa risks nothing, right? He lets someone else do the fighting for him. Well, God is watching closely, like he always does. He knows all about the hostile king of Asa's northern border. And he is so disappointed when Asa takes the comfortable way out that he sends a prophet to Asa, whose name is Hanani. Turn with me now to 2 Chronicles chapter 16. Let's look at verse 7. At that time, Hanani the seer came to King Asa and told him, because you have put your trust in the king of Syria instead of in the Lord your God, you missed your chance. Don't you remember what happened to the Ethiopians and their vast army? At that time, you relied on the Lord, and he handed them all over to you. Verse 9. The eyes of the Lord search the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. What a fool you have been. I want you to underline 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, if you're using your Bible. Do you see what happens here? God knew the predicament Asa was in. It was a chance for Asa to do good and express faith. It was a chance to be fully committed and prove it. But you hear God saying in so many words, I've searched for someone who I could use. Someone who would do my bidding. Someone who would trust me. Someone who would be committed to saving my people from their enemy. And Asa, you ducked. You chunked out. What a fool you have been. Tell somebody, fully committed. Fully committed. So you got the first one. What matters to God? Two categories of people he's looking for. He's searching for. He's on the hunt for. And the first one we have discovered So if you're looking, you're just going to keep going past Matthew and then Mark, and then you'll be there at Luke. And we're going to look at Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 11, because we're going to pick up after that on next week. Tell somebody, you got to come back next week. You got to come back next week. You can't get it all in 30 minutes.
That's right.
So we're going to start today with 15, verses 1 through 11. You're there and say amen. Amen. Let's start off first in chunks. I'm going to read into your hearing 15 verses 1 through 7 to get started. This one is what we call the parable of the lost sheep. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Now, interestingly enough, after such a powerful story, Jesus doesn't pause. Read with me verses 8 through 10. Parable of the lost coin. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and neighbors and say, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost coin." In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. Now that's two parables back to back. And then he doesn't stop there. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. And we're going to stop right there in the interest of this part of the series. And we'll pick up next week on that part of the series, the parable of the lost son. But I need you to see something here. As he is telling these 3 parables, first the lost sheep, then the lost coin, then the lost wayward son. If you've read any parables in the past, you would probably discover a pattern. Normally, when he tells a parable, he tells the story and then he goes on to explain what it means before he tells another parable. But in Luke 15, Jesus doesn't pause to explain it. He just launches right into the next parable, and then the next parable, and then the next parable. Why? Why would he do that? Well, to understand that, you need to remember the introduction that we read just a few minutes ago when we looked at 15 and we looked at verses 1 through 3. Look at them again. It says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. Now, you will remember on last week, we talked about the Pharisees, and we talked a little bit about how he had to handle them in order to get them to understand what was important to God. And so here we have this again on this week in Luke chapter 15. Jesus tells the story of the lost sheep, and then the lost coin, and then the wayward son. And these stories are so rich and carefully woven that I won't be able to unpack each and every one of them this morning, but I do want us to extract some similarities and some commonalities to see a common theme of something that God is trying to tell us about that second category of people that he is seeking. Is that all right? It may just open your eyes and that we would be able to see what matters to him. In our translation of the Bible, the story of the lost sheep begins this way. Suppose one of you. So literally this should be translated, which of you being a shepherd. Now remember, Jesus is delivering this message to a devoutly religious group of leaders. They're upper class Orthodox Jews. In their mind, in their day, being a shepherd was a lowly trade. Remember, we talked about that when I did the Advent series, and I shared with you how powerful and how symbolic it was that God would send the shepherds to announce the arrival of Jesus, because in their day, shepherds were not considered a high profession. And so he starts off his story asking them to imagine that they are essentially second-class citizens when they're top-notch. So he chooses to tell a story about a shepherd to get their attention. He makes up a story about this shepherd, and he asks them a question about doing something that he knows they would never do. When he says, which of you being a shepherd, immediately all of them know the answer. Well, none of us would ever be a shepherd, so whatever you're getting ready to say, we wouldn't be caught in that situation anyway. But if we had sheep, probably would hire somebody to watch them for us. But you can go ahead, Jesus, with your parable. And so he does. And then the second shock comes to him, those that are listening, when not only is the story about a shepherd saddled with the responsibility of actually losing a sheep, now if you look at verse 4, it says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Now, again, to get into the context of the culture, this is another no-no. If you had sheep, you wouldn't lose one of them. That would be a slight to you. So you would try to frame it in such a way where you would say, one of the sheep got lost. Not, I lost one of the sheep. So you're asking them to imagine that, A, they're lowly shepherds, and then to be integral enough to acknowledge that a sheep getting lost was not the sheep getting lost, but that they lost the sheep. Now we're asking a whole lot. And so, as he's posing this question and the religious leaders are listening to him, they're thinking, I wouldn't have sheep. If I did have sheep, I wouldn't lose a sheep. But then we get further and we say, if you did, if you were a shepherd, and if you did have a sheep, and if you had 100 of them. Now 100 is a large number. So it's a setup in such a way where you could derive from that, if I have 100 and I lose one, the goal is that the person that's listening is going to be like, I could probably make it with 99, right? If you had 100, if you had 100 sheep and you just lost just one of them, for what you needed the sheep to do, you probably could still make it with just 99. gets lost. He leaves in this story. The other 99. What is going on here? You just left 99 sheep so that you could go and bring back one? He leaves them in potential danger to go and find the one that is lost. And when he finds the sheep, what does he do? He puts it on his shoulders. Wow. What does that symbolize? He really cares for the sheep. He went for him. He found him. Then he puts him on his shoulders. He brings it home. And that's not the end of it. When he gets back, what does he do? He calls his friends. He says, rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. Why? Because he is happy. He's so happy, he throws a party to celebrate. But he doesn't stop there. He could have stopped there. But he said, we're going to keep going with this. I want to make sure you clearly understand, because you know how we'll do. We'll try to dismiss the one little section and try to make it fit to something else, and that's not what Jesus meant. He said, no, y'all ain't going to be able to do none of that. This is going to be plain. Let me give you another parable. So now he goes to the star of the second one, and this time it's a woman. So remember, he's talking to devout religious leaders, men, Pharisaic men. And you know how they felt about women. So if you thought they didn't like the idea of having to imagine they were a shepherd, now he's telling them a story and asking them to imagine that they are third-class citizens, a woman. And what does this woman have that's of value to her? You couldn't relate to the sheep. We know you can relate to these coins. How many coins did she have? Jesus is reducing the proportions here. We went from 100 to 10. Coins were very rare in this time. And much of their trade was carried out by barter. And so any cash you had would be used only for emergencies, only to buy things you couldn't get any other way. Some scholars think this woman's coins represent her dowry for bride price. Many tell us that a woman who had coins back then would probably make jewelry out of them, stringing them on a cord to make a necklace. So when this woman lost her coin, it ruined everything. It wasn't just that she was down one coin. She was also going to either be wearing jewelry that was missing one of the decorations, or she was still going to be without something of great value. So this panics the woman, and she scours the house until she finds it. And when she finds it, what does she do again? Do we have another party? Why? Is she happy too? Are we starting to see a pattern? Jesus then tells the third story, and although we didn't read it this week, can I just see by a show of hands who's ever heard the story about the lost son? Okay. If you didn't, come back next week. That's how I get you. You're going to come back next week. But I can give you this summary now that you have to give in context, understand, no respectable Middle Eastern man would do. Because unlike in our culture, they didn't wear pants. They wore very long robes. So imagine to run, you would have to do what? Lift up your robe. People would see your ankles. And as a respectable, middle-class, Eastern man, you would never do that. But here again, he's doing this. And he's running in his robe, and he's lifting his robe, and his ankles are exposed. And so he would lose face in front of the entire village for doing such a thing. May I remind you, we're talking to the Pharisees. So first you want us to imagine we're shepherds. Then you want us to imagine we're a woman. And now you want us to imagine we're a man that has no dignity and is lifting up his robe in public? Not going to happen. When the son is found, what happens again? The father throws the mother of all parties to celebrate his return. Why? He's happy. Now, these are three stories, and I wish we had time to go into each one of them very much in detail. But, again, we will go into the last one in detail next week. But what are you seeing as common ground in each one of those stories? The plot line in each one of these stories involves something that is lost. And for those of you who are note takers, as I move, you could probably get a good screen shot for your notes. Lost. A sheep is lost, then a coin is lost, and then a wayward son is lost. Now, if you've got your own copy of the Bible, you might find it helpful at some point to go through each one of those chapters in detail and underline the word lost, loses, and lost to see how many times each word actually is repeated in various forms. That would be a fun exercise to do at home as you continue your study. To the hero of each one of the stories. Did you see that? The shepherd is so concerned about the loss of his sheep that he risked the other 99 to find them. The woman is so distraught over the loss of one coin that she cancels all her plans and scours the entire house. The father is so brokenhearted that his son has wandered, that he endures the scorn of the entire village by running to him when he finally returns home. In each case, what is lost matters so much to the one who lost it that it warrants an all-out search. Number 3. In each of the stories, when what was lost is found, the hero is so happy that he or she throws a party to express their joy. And number 4, in each of the stories, the hero is someone who wouldn't really be admired by most of the religious leaders. The first hero is a shepherd, second-class citizen. The second is a woman, third-class citizen. And the third is a father that, although would be a potentially admirable figure, that all changed when he does the unthinkable in order to run to his son. So we put those 4 things together, and what do you have? You have Jesus standing in front front of a group of long-standing religious types who think they have figured out what really matters to God. They've read 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, which we read a moment ago. They would have had it memorized by the time that they were 10 years old. They see themselves as the fully committed. So their honest and best thinking is that they and only they matter to God. So when they see Jesus talking with the outcasts of society, they're angered because they believe he, being a rabbi, is diminishing God's name and dignity by associating with such low-life people. And Jesus is so angst-filled by their thinking that he tells them not one, not two, but 3 parables back to back, as if to say, your perception of who matters to God and who doesn't is so far off that I'm going to clear this concept up once and for all. I'm going to rapid fire truth into your souls so that you will never again wonder what matters to God. And that helps us to discover what that second category might be. What matters to God? What have you come to conclude as you listen to what I've shared with you on this morning? There's 2 categories of people. We said the one was the fully committed. The fully committed. Those who are not proud. Those who are not self-conscious. Those who are not the religious types who think that the most important thing is their religious life. But he's also telling us who that second category is. Those who are lost. And he's really saying 2 things in this parable. First, lost people matter to God so much that he's on an all-out search to find them. Every time a lost person is found, all of heaven rejoices with the hero of heaven, which is God. And secondly, the fully committed are those who understand this and rejoice with God when he finds what is lost, so much so that they join the all-out search as well. Can you see why God says in 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, my eyes are searching the earth to find every person who is fully committed to me? It's because God so loves those who have wandered from his fatherhood that he is enlisting all of his other children who are willing to join the search. Only the fully committed reach out to the lost. Only the fully committed serve long hours at the church so that it's a place where the lost can get found. Only the fully committed pray diligently for their friends who will otherwise spend a Christless eternity. Only the fully committed alter their spending habits so they can render the full tithe and fund ministries that reach lost people. Only the fully committed stay up late, dreaming of ways to reach out to their lost friends and neighbors. Only the fully committed look out of eyes that sees as God does, thinking first about others and second about themselves. Only the fully committed. us to God? Have we become so far off that we think that we are fully committed because we show up for service for 1 hour a week and drop some change in the basket on the way out? Do we think that only people like us who are believers matter to God? And do we think that we have our important positions and that's all that's important? But what would happen if we each did everything in our power to invest the rest of our lives in helping build a church where the fully committed reached out to the lost? That's why we're here. That's why we fought the tough battles to be here. That's why we endure the sacrifices to be here. So that God's two groups of people would have a chance to meet. In our pre-launch days, I would look around the room of the members of our startup, and I think, these people get it. They really get it. Sure, we all have our problems and our struggles in this room, but none of us here is alone in this effort. We're all here because we want God to be pleased by our full commitment to Him. And they're here, and you're here because you want Him to use you. And you want Him to use Excel Church to help the other category that God cares so much about, the lost. And now I want so much for all of you to have that same fire. And I hope over the next 4 weeks, you'll make some decisions about which spiritual camp you want to be in and what part you want to play for God. I hope all of you will make the decision to invest your life with God because it's the only life you have. And I hope in these next 4 weeks, you'll decide to build relationships with your neighbors and your co-workers, praying for them and looking for openings to invite them to church. I hope you'll decide to help make your church a place where seekers are welcome, getting to know others and finding a place to make a difference, according to whatever the gifts and talents are that God has given you. And I hope you'll decide to manage your time in such a way that you can show up when we come together, whether it's for our weekly service or for our small groups that are going to be happening as we finish out this month. That will help you to grow even the more. And last but not least, I truly hope that you'll decide to manage even your money in such a careful way that you never feel tempted to rob God, that you're able to render the full time, so that we can not only add more ministries, but even open more days to touch more lost people. And I hope you'll see God in each one of the parables that we read today, and His love, whether He was represented as the shepherd, the woman, or the father. He's still a God that's on an all-out search for those who are lost outside of our family. Can you do those things? I share those with you because I know a lot of times when I share a message, it leaves such deep thought that you're wondering, well, God, what do you want me to do? How can I grow closer? How can I be more useful? And I believe that if you revisit those things, that will be the answer that you seek. So as I close, believers, In this world today, I know you heard me mention earlier that there's really 4 categories, but we wish that there were only 2. Well, here's how we get to the breakdown of the 4. We are in 2 categories, the casual and the committed. Be honest with yourself this morning. Which category are you in? And which category do you want to be in? If you desire to be among the committed today, we're going to pray for you. And all you have to continue to praise God, give me your heart for the lost. Yeah. Simple prayer. God, give me your heart for lost people. And I'd ask all of you who are believers to pray that every day between now and the end of our series. And then that other compartment in the seekers. Seekers could really also be divided into 2 groups as well. Those who are lost, who are looking, and the lost who aren't interested in finding. And I hope you'll decide today that if you're not ready to come into relationship with God through his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, that you'll decide to go on a search for him, like he's on a search for you. So here's how I want that to end. I want to give all of you a chance to register a decision. Give you a chance to decide in your mind which category you would like to be in. And to make a decision that you're willing to do what it takes to get there. Could you bow your heads with me in prayer?